516 earthquakes hit one stretch of Mexican coastline in just 3 months. One of those quakes, a magnitude 6, sits on the exact same fault as San Andreas. 20 million people across Southern California live directly along that same connected fault system. Back on June 30th, the seafloor beneath the Gulf of California tore loose without warning. The rupture struck about 75 kilometers southwest of El Progreso, so it hit offshore water 10 kilometers down. So that quake was shallow enough to rattle homes across northwestern Mexico. Folks in Sinaloa felt the ground roll and walked straight out into the open street. The United States Geological Survey slapped a green alert on it because panic was never warranted. Green means low odds of casualties and low odds of damage. So basically, calm as it gets. No tsunami followed. No warning sirens sounded. So most newsrooms moved on by nightfall. Mexico had a moderate offshore quake, nothing unusual. At least, that is how it looked. That read on it, though, skips the one detail that actually matters here. Folks, this rupture did not happen on some random, disconnected fault out in the ocean. It happened on the southern tip of that same plate boundary. So this was not some distant event. Farther up that boundary, the fault carries a name every American already recognizes: San Andreas. So this was not a minor Mexican earthquake, plain and simple. It was way more. It was movement on California's own fault machine, because scientists call the moment critical. And this single quake did not travel alone, which means it was far from a lone event. So it was the biggest shock inside a tight cluster that hammered the Gulf in one day. Alongside the main shock, 3 more quakes rattled the same stretch within 24 hours. That is not the signature of a quiet fault, which means it did not just slip once. That is a whole segment of the Earth's crust rearranging itself, which means the ground keeps shifting live. Seismographs picked up the shaking as far away as San Diego, Parkfield, and even Japan. For a shallow magnitude 6, that reach alone is not exactly shocking on its own, but it is a plain reminder the energy did not stay polite and stop at the border. Picture the San Andreas Fault, and you probably picture one line stopping near the border. That picture, honest to goodness, is just a map maker's habit, not actual geology. Plate boundaries do not care about national lines, and this one keeps right on going. What runs through California is the boundary between 2 of the planet's largest tectonic plates. The Pacific Plate grinds northwest, so the North American Plate keeps sliding to the southeast. Those 2 plates slide past each other at roughly the same speed your fingernails grow. Follow that boundary south past the Imperial Valley, and it slides straight into Mexican waters. Down there, the plates pull apart too, so fresh seafloor keeps forming right underneath them. That stretching motion is literally birthing a brand new ocean basin called the Gulf of California Rift. Short spreading centers link up with long transformed faults where fresh crust rises from below. Here is the detail that should reframe this whole story for you. No two ways about it. The Gulf Rift, the Imperial Fault, the San Jacinto, and the San Andreas are not separate. They are all one continuous plate boundary, so it works like a single connected conveyor belt. An earthquake on the Gulf end is, mechanically speaking, connected straight to the San Andreas. It is not some distant foreign event, so it is California's own fault machine simply moving. And when one end of a connected system releases strain, so that stress has to go somewhere. Every time the Gulf shifts, pressure on the segments up north changes right along with it. Here's another clue folks tend to miss. This quake produced absolutely no tsunami at all. Big tsunamis need a mega thrust rupture, so one plate has to dive beneath another sharply. The Gulf of California does not work that way, and neither does the San Andreas. Both are transform boundaries, sliding sideways past each other instead of stacking one on top. Sideways motion barely disturbs the water above it, so even a strong quake stays quiet offshore. That missing tsunami is not proof this quake was weak. Quite honestly, it is the opposite. So it confirms the Gulf and the San Andreas share the exact same violent family tree. So the quake was shallow, energetic, part of a cluster, and sitting on California's own boundary, which leads to the one question everyone in Southern California actually wants answered right now. Could a magnitude 6 down in Mexico set off the long-feared big one up north? The honest answer deserves 2 parts, because the truth here is more interesting than yes or no. Straight up, the direct answer is no. This one quake did not snap the San Andreas. Its epicenter sits hundreds of kilometers south of the dangerous locked segments near Los Angeles. Seismic energy fades fast with distance, so this shock could not reach that far intact. Nobody should brace for some instant same-day chain reaction, so you can set that fear down. But there is a longer answer, and it is the part keeping seismologists wide awake at night. Just because a distant quake cannot snap a fault instantly does not mean it cannot matter. There are 2 documented ways a distant earthquake can nudge a nearby fault, so both matter here. The first is called dynamic triggering, and it is not some fringe theory. It is measured science. When a big quake happens, its seismic waves ripple outward, so the shaking reaches distant faults. Those passing waves can act like a nudge on faults that are strained right at their limit. Think of a glass balanced right on the edge of a table. One small vibration tips it over. Imperial Valley keeps lighting up with small swarms, so scientists watch it after every Gulf rupture. Back in 1992, the Landers earthquake set off bursts of activity hundreds of miles away. The lesson from Landers was not that distant triggering is common. Most of the time, it is not. The lesson was that it is possible. So faults sitting right at the edge deserve close watching. A relaxed fault just absorbs the shake and does nothing. A loaded fault is a whole different story. The second mechanism moves slower and quieter, so scientists call it static stress transfer. Picture the plate boundary as one long connected chain running from Mexico up into California. When the southern end releases tension, so the whole chain will not necessarily relax at once, depending on the geometry, which means letting go down south can load the northern segments harder. So this quake did not snap anything in California. No 2 ways about it, folks. But on a system carrying more stress than it has in 1,000 years, so it added weight. That is why this word overloaded flips the story from unsettling to flat out alarming. A recent analysis of tectonic stress in Southern California backs that word up with hard numbers. Scientists measured decades of ground deformation so they could compare it against the historical rupture record. The Southern San Andreas and its neighbor, the San Jacinto, have hit their highest stress in centuries. Not just high stress. So this marks the highest levels either fault has held in 1,000 years. That conclusion came from years of satellite and ground measurements, not a hunch or a guess. Picture a spring compressed for 10 centuries, so all that motion just keeps storing as energy. The longer a fault stays locked, the more energy it banks for the day it finally lets go. To put that timeline in human terms, the Crusades had not even started when stress ran this high. No modern city has ever sat on faults loaded like this. So we are truly the first. We are, mark my words, the very first generation to live on top of this much stored energy. The established rupture record backs up the alarm, so this is not just theory anymore. The southernmost stretch of the San Andreas, near Coachella Valley, has not ruptured since 1680. That segment has historically broken loose somewhere between every 180 and 250 years. Do that arithmetic yourself, folks. So this stretch of fault is honestly well past due. Scientists are careful to say critically loaded and overdue describe elevated odds, not a calendar date. Stress tells researchers a fault is close to failing, so the exact day stays unknown. But the loading itself is real. It is measured. And that is why this story deserves attention. A distant magnitude 6 earthquake, in that context, earns a full conversation instead of a shrug. This is genuinely the part where casual viewers turn into serious fault line followers, so stick around. Almost all public attention lands on the San Andreas, so specialists quietly worry about a different fault. It is called the San Jacinto, and most people outside California have honestly never even heard of it. This fault cuts through some of the most populated inland country, so it matters enormously here. It runs through Riverside, San Bernardino, Hemet, and the sprawling communities of the Inland Empire. From there, it trends south towards San Diego, running beneath neighborhoods, hospitals, and major freeways. The San Jacinto is, flat out, the most seismically active fault in Southern California. It is capable of producing magnitude 6 and even magnitude 7 earthquakes completely on its own. The real danger is not the San Jacinto rupturing alone. It is what happens if it acts first. The fault that goes first can hand its energy off, so the bigger fault next door goes too. That is where the geography gets seriously frightening, because these two faults do not stay apart. They meet at a narrow mountain junction north of San Bernardino called Cajon Pass, plain and simple. Drive Interstate 15 between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, and you go right through that same pass. That corridor also carries major rail lines, aqueducts, and the fuel and power lines an entire region needs. Scientists who model these ruptures, so they call a junction like this an actual earthquake gate. Under normal conditions, that junction acts like a barrier, and any rupture there simply runs out of steam. But when both systems are heavily stressed, so the gate itself can swing wide open instead. A rupture starting on the San Jacinto could blast straight through and jump onto the San Andreas. That kind of jump would ignite a far longer rupture, so the earthquake ends up much larger. Peer-reviewed modeling of that exact junction, published back in 2016, backs this scenario up. Researchers reconstructed a historical earthquake from the year 1812 as exactly this kind of joint rupture. Rupture length is tied directly to magnitude, so a joint rupture like that changes the entire scale. The scale of a catastrophe like that is not a guess, so it has actually been modeled. The Geological Survey built a public planning scenario for exactly this kind of event, called ShakeOut. Their hypothetical magnitude 7.8 rupture on the southern San Andreas paints a grim picture. That scenario estimates around 1,800 deaths and roughly 50,000 injuries across the region. Total losses in that same scenario run close to $200 billion. No exaggeration needed. That is not a forecast for next Tuesday. So it shows what the loaded system can do. It shows exactly what a fully loaded fault system to the north is capable of producing. A small nudge from Mexico is nudging a machine, so that machine can do all of that damage. So where does all of this leave the city sitting closest to that loaded fault line? Los Angeles sits west of the main trace, close enough that a major rupture would shake hard there. Palm Springs and the Coachella Valley sit almost directly on top of the most overdue segment. Riverside and San Bernardino both straddle the San Jacinto. The fault specialist watched the closest. Hemet and the wider Inland Empire sit squarely in the path this fault has carved for centuries. San Diego sits at the southern tail of that same trend line running down from the Inland Empire. San Bernardino also guards Cajon Pass, the exact junction where two major faults come together. Every one of these cities sits along that connected machine. So none of them stands totally alone. None of that means a major quake hits any specific one of these cities tomorrow morning. It just means the risk is not evenly spread. So some places carry more of the load. That is exactly why preparation looks different depending on which side of Cajon Pass you call home. Heads up, folks. We want to know which fault line or region you want covered next. Cascadia up in the Pacific Northwest, the New Madrid zone back east. You tell us where to look. Drop a comment with the region you are curious about and we will dig into the data. We read every single comment. And honestly, your requests shape exactly what we cover next. So do not be shy about telling us which corner of the country worries you the most. And while you were down there, type your city into the comments below right now. We want to see just how many of you are actually living inside this exact risk zone. Comment your city, tag a neighbor who needs to see this, and let us map it out together. Now, every time a big quake makes headlines. So the same old conspiracy theories start circulating fast. The most common one blames a secret government weapon called HAARP for causing the shaking. HAARP is real, but it is honestly just a research project sitting up in Alaska. It uses radio antennas to study the ionosphere, a charged layer way up in the atmosphere. That equipment has no physical way to reach the crust, so it cannot possibly trigger an earthquake. There is flat out no scientific evidence humans can trigger deep tectonic ruptures like this one. So you can go ahead and rule that theory out completely. No two ways about it. The second theory blames solar storms and flares. So people think those trigger earthquakes on Earth. The Geological Survey has already looked into this, and the answer is a clear, documented no. The sun runs on an 11-year cycle, so you might expect a pattern, but there is none. Quakes happen at random, driven entirely by geological forces deep inside the planet, not by space weather. Even if solar storms stopped completely tomorrow, earthquakes would keep happening exactly like they always have. Solar storms mess with power grids, satellites, and radio signals, never with the actual crust below us. So set that fear aside too, folks, and focus on what the real science is actually saying. The real story here needs no secret hand, so no hidden government program has to explain it. It is simply a plate boundary doing exactly what plate boundaries do, right on schedule. Except this particular fault network has wound itself to a 1,000-year breaking point already. The correct response to all of this is not panic. It is honest-to-goodness preparation. The southern San Andreas will rupture again. So that much is not a matter of if. So the only real question left, according to every specialist we found, is simply when. Every expert we came across says plainly that the region, quite frankly, is not ready yet. Remember those 516 earthquakes we opened with? That swarm has not slowed down yet. Remember that one magnitude 6 quake sitting on California's own fault? It did its job as a warning. And remember those 20 million people living along that same connected system? That number has not changed. A quiet green dot on a map earned all this attention. So there had to be a reason. It pointed, like a warning light, straight at the machine to the north. While there is still time. This quake did not pull the trigger, folks. So it just reminded everyone the fault is loaded. So type your city into the comments right now and let us see exactly who is watching. Tell us which fault or which storm system you want us to break down after this one. The data is public. The stress is measured. So the only unknown left is simply the timing. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep watching the ground beneath the cities you actually call home. 20 million people, one connected fault, and a clock that has been ticking for 1,000 years.